Did you become aware that Joe Biden tried to get Ghani to lie about the conditions in Afghanistan? He did that in July. Did you know that right away?
I'm not aware of what President Biden...
You're not aware of the phone call that Biden had with Ghani where he said, whether it is true or not, we want you to go out there and paint a rosy picture of what's going on in Afghanistan.
He's good. Congressman Matt Gaetz, now in the majority, in the Republican majority in the House of Representatives, joins us once again. Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida, House Judiciary Committee, Subcommittee on Weaponization of Government, and the House Armed Services Committee. Welcome back, sir. How does it feel to be in the majority again?
Well, we have tools because we're in the majority and because we put up a fight at the beginning of January to ensure that we could have votes on individual appropriations acts, that we could actually do critical oversight that the American people demand. But now we actually have to use those tools, Greg. It is not enough just to admire them. We have to put them to use, and it's great to be participating in that work.
It's great to watch. Are you at all frustrated that, the media, they're downplaying this? It was wall-to-wall coverage when Democrats had the gavel. And for you guys, it's, they're always minimizing it or looking the other way. Does it matter from a governmental standpoint whether or not people are paying attention? A lot of people are, but you know what I mean.
We always expect headwinds in getting our message out, but the information we drew out today in this hearing was searing. You have taxpayer funds being used to try to shape the very nature of truth itself. You have news organizations subject to these different groups that direct ad revenue. And time and again, you had the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security trying to coerce social media companies to promote certain content, to ban other types of content. And we went from directing some of these tools to terrorists abroad to actually turning them inward against our own people. And that's what the Weaponization Subcommittee stands to reverse. We do not believe that the government should be trying to really impair the constitutional and First Amendment rights of our citizens, even when people are wrong, even when people disagree.
Can I ask you about this? I mean, this is wrong. It is indefensible, yet they are defending it or they're changing the subject. Did they ever level with you behind the scenes that they don't like this either?
There is precisely one Democrat in Congress who is horrified by the Twitter files and calling for reform. That would be California's Ro Khanna. Why aren't there others? Something changed in our country, Greg. The left used to believe that we needed this vibrant marketplace of ideas, that we needed to tolerate offensive speech and speech that we would find otherwise very objectionable. And now they want to get down to where one scientist disagrees with another scientist, so a particular account is banned or their reach isn't allowed to go forward. And so what I believe is that we know these things because Elon Musk bought Twitter. But I think the very revelations you saw from the FBI and Elvis Chan in trying to control Twitter will also be seen at Google, at Meta, at Amazon, at Apple, at Microsoft, any number of places where conservatives find themselves on a list because they don't go along with the prevailing view. And I would be just as upset and just as animated if they were doing these things to people who had views I disagree with. Look, it's easy to stand up for the speech that you agree with. The hard part is saying that for us to have a culture of free speech, an ecosystem of debate and discourse, we actually have to be not such like snowflakes that we aren't willing to hear things that we find offensive, objectionable, or disagreeable.
Totally agree. Congressman, I've seen a bunch of articles the past, months, but certainly this week that America, our military versus the Chinese military, we wouldn't necessarily win. And it seems like an incredibly urgent situation. General Milley is still on the job and doesn't seem to have his priorities straight. I love how you're not afraid to take on generals because some of them are not good. Are we going to fix that anytime soon? Because we're in real trouble.
Well, we have to excise the wokeness from our military, a wokeness that has made our military weaker. But unfortunately, the president, the commander-in-chief, gets to choose his military advisors, and he has chosen truly two of the dumbest people to ever advise a president in American history, in Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley. These people have made a career out of failing up, a career out of losing. They make bad decisions and bad assessment one after the other, and so we are a nation less safe with Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley in charge of our military. And if Joe Biden weren't so addled himself, he probably would have fired them by now. There are important technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning where I do believe China has created a gap with the United States. I'm worried about hypersonics and space as well, but you can't hold the high ground if you're trusting lowbrow people to make the decisions, and that's gone on for far too long.
Do you believe in UFOs? What's going on with these things lately? What can you tell us?
I have seen evidence of craft that I am not familiar with any of our allies or adversaries or even our country possessing. I've seen that craft taken by air crews who have gotten quite close to it, and we've got a lot more questions about why this information isn't more broadly available to the American people. If there's stuff flying over our skies and we don't know about it, whether it's Chinese, whether it's unworldly, I think we need a lot more transparency, and we've actually got a group of Congress members together that are going to be conducting a lot more investigations and trying to get this information before the public so that we can have a lot more assessment of the threat level and the risk level.
That would be great. And by the way, one more thing, and anything else you care to add, but thank you for your support in our struggle with DirecTV. And
it's Friday. Let's talk about some aliens here for a moment. This is actually pretty interesting. Alarming increase in UFO sightings has the Pentagon's attention. The crafts demonstrate unusual flight characteristics, performance capabilities, technology that, to our knowledge, defies explanation from any country's top scientists and researchers. The Pentagon notes in their 2022 annual UFO report, in addition to the 144 reports covered during the 17 years of UFO reporting, there have been 247 new reports and another 119 either since discovered or reported, totaling 510 UFO reports as of August 30th, 2022. Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee says the U.S. government has recovered UFOs, which are currently being reverse engineered. He joins us now, along with UFO expert and filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. And gentlemen, thank you both so much for coming on. Congressman, that's a major allegation. What do we know at this point?
Well, 1947, I think it's pretty clear there was a UFO crash or a mid-air collision, Roswell, New Mexico, military intelligence, which is a whole lot like congressional ethics. It really doesn't exist. But military intelligence comes out and says, we've in fact recovered a craft and a saucer. And then the next day they bring this poor lieutenant colonel out and say, oh, no, it was a hot air balloon. You know, we've got our top pilots in the world are some of our Navy and Air Force pilots. Yeah. And they are, in fact, spotting these things. I've talked to them. They're not allowed to testify in congressional hearings.
Our military pilots are spotting these, and we've seen this reported a lot, but they're not allowed to testify, you're saying?
That is correct.
Wow.
We had one there at the Intelligence Committee that was open to the public. It was Democrat controlled. I don't expect much better from the Republicans. I think it goes a lot deeper.
And let me just
got a lot of people compromised, brother.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jeremy, I want to talk to you for a second. The Pentagon's UFO chief. This is a Pentagon guy, a UFO chief, the chairman of Harvard's astronomy department as well, both releasing a report on Tuesday where they wrote an artificial interstellar object could potentially be a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close passage to Earth. You've got the Pentagon talking about the idea of a mothership going above us and sending probes down.
Yeah, well, listen, let's get to the crux of the issue here. The UFO phenomenon, it's nothing new. This has been with us for a long time. Yep. The silver bullet would be if we have been exploiting these technologies through crash retrieval programs and that sort of thing. These programs, these exploitation programs, they do exist. So I would agree with the congressman here. And first of all, I'd like to thank you, by the way, for your advocacy on this UAP issue. And I would like to also encourage you, Congressman, with whatever power that you do have with your colleagues, to do one thing in particular. Right now, we have the U.S. Senate Committee on Appropriations. They have jurisdiction over the spending. We have Senator Patty Murray. We have Senator Susan Collins, who are able to audit these special access programs, such as ones that are held, like you're talking about, at Lockheed Martin. So I would like to include in this investigation, which I ask of you, for example, Lieutenant General Dimitri Henry. You know, he is the current director for Intelligence Joint Staff, J2. They have authority and management over the intelligence community, and they should be asking questions. If we do have UFO exploitation programs, what I'm calling the silver bullet, they should be able to ask of Lockheed and other contractors, what are they working on that goes back to 1947 and the UFO topic. And I feel like you could be very effective.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I want to show, because we're close to running out of time, I want to show just something that you have, Jeremy. This is exclusively obtained photos that you have of images over Baghdad, Iraq, May of 2022. It's kind of hard for people to see what we're talking about. If we take the banner down, you'll be able to see it better there in the bottom right. There you go. What can you tell us about these pictures? I mean, to me, this doesn't look like anything. Why do you make something of this?
Yeah, because the Air Force classified this in a secret archive as UAP or UFO. We call it the Baghdad Phantom because that was part of the file name. This was filmed by the U.S. Air Force. Reaper drone footage. This is the first time the public gets to see what the Air Force classifies as UAP. And I think the congressman would also agree that this transparency to the American public, if it doesn't hurt national security, it's corroding. Yeah. This secrecy is corroding trust with the American public. So thank you for your work, both of you, for reporting on this.
Absolutely.
And that is what that is.
Congressman, real quick, I want to play Matt Gaetz from last night on Greg Kelly's show. Take a listen to this.
I have seen evidence of craft that I am not familiar with any of our allies or adversaries or even our country possessing. I've seen that craft taken by air crews who have gotten quite close to it. And we've got a lot more questions about why this information isn't more broadly available to the American people.
I mean, it's starting to sound like there's something being covered up.
Sure. I was with Matt. I know what he is referring to. And I will tell Jeremy, we've got to have hearings. We're going to have hearings. I talked to Speaker McCarthy. I talked to the chairman of the Oversight Committee. I'm on that Oversight Committee. That's where it's got to happen. We're going to have hearings. We're going to ask them tough questions.
I hope that you do.
Jeremy. Jeremy, get with me, brother. I want you there.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you both so much. I mean, you got the Pentagon talking about a mothership. It's astounding how much progress we're making on this thing. And thank you both so much for coming on. Good to see you guys.
Thank you, Rob, for covering this.
Thank you.
Of course.